pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Monday, February 18th, 2019. Welcome to our live show. If you're listening to us on video live, hope you like the new look, and make sure you let us know. If you do, make sure you subscribe, you like, and you share our videos to help us continue to do more. Joining us on the show today, of course, Duane Rollins, my partner in crime, my co-host of A Daily Adventure. But joining us today to talk about Independiente from a Panama perspective, we have David Sakata from Cable on the Sports and Diario Pro. How you doing this morning, David?
I'm great. Thank you for having me today.
No worries. And David, of course, is down there in Panama right now where he works out of. Let's just start with a broad stroke here. This is a club that we have never seen before in the Champions League level. We've seen other Panamanian teams that have had some success over the years, but this one is completely new. So just give us a bit of a broad stroke preview on what this club is and where they came from.
Well, Independiente, which we refer to as CAI for its initials, CAI, it's a relative new club when it comes to the powers here in Panama. They started out a couple of years ago. They had a different direction when it comes to the administration that was running the club. And when they first made it to the first division here, they created quite an impact with players, with a team that was playing good football. That was maybe 4 years ago. But then out of all everything that came with playing in the first division, they got carried away, and they could not hold the project further than a semester. So by next semester, when they were in the first division, they ended up facing relegation, making it to the final, trying to make it to the finals, and faced relegation. They eventually went down to a second division, which they had to run up again, and then finally in this new iteration of the club, with new administrations, with a vision, with a plan, they were able to pull off an interesting upset tournaments ago by becoming champions of our national league. The interesting part here is that even when they were already a formed institution, they did something that no one had been doing yet in our national football structure here in Panama. And they created, or they bought land in order to have their own training area and their club, like a physical area where the club was stationed, with dorms and 2 fields. They were artificial, they were turf, but still they had 2 turfs to training. And that might not seem too significant when explained to the outer world, but the thing that here in Panama, every stadium or field is state-owned. So you can imagine that no team in Panama has a stadium, no team in Panama has their own training ground, so they have to go by whatever's available, and they have to plan or schedule their weeks according to who comes first when asking for field and training. So our structure is obviously not a professional structure in terms of the way teams are set up on their daily schedules or their weekly schedules before game day. So having CAI Independiente having their own field, their training field, really made a significant difference, and it ended up leading them to the final and winning that against Tauro, which is one of the biggest clubs here in Panama. So that's the recent history for CAI.
And they have started fairly well in this particular season right now, 3 wins, I believe. In this competition, though, Panama has struggled a little bit. 20 wins over the history of the Champions League era, 9 draws, 42 losses by the Panamanian teams. How is the CCL perceived in Panama, and what is the expectation for a champion club going into this in any given year?
So it's the competition every club wants to be part of. It's definitely the opportunity to showcase. It's the opportunity for players to experience international level of play, to face off against players and teams and in stadiums that it's hardly ever going to come by them. So it's perceived as a big deal. You know, making it to the SCL, I'm sorry, is an awesome achievement for a national club. So yes, people are expected to participate. And when news came that there's a change in the format a couple of weeks ago, you know, it created some sort of weird feeling, because yes, there are chances to have even more participation given the new structure they're setting up. But still, we don't have a direct berth to the Champions League anymore. So we have to go through CONCACAF League, which is, you know, not perceived as the same, because we all know that Champions League is the elite competition for clubs in a region. So it is viewed as an important thing. And for Independiente, they have invested a lot, even, you know, I don't want to say neglecting the past tournament, but, you know, just saving enough to have a more competitive team towards this semester when they had international play.
I'm wondering one thing as well, David, is when we look at the players coming out of Panama, a lot of them look at their counterparts that have made the move to Major League Soccer further down in their career and maybe get a bit of the glamour. How important is a tournament like this, a game like this against TFC, to maybe establish a potential transfer future for certain players, or to better their opportunity financially in the future? Do the players view this tournament a bit as an opportunity like this?
Yes. They understand that, as I was mentioning before, without a tournament like this, and when having a rival in the capacity of Toronto FC, it gives them a chance to showcase themselves towards the eyes and the attention of people who would barely ever know who a Jorman Aguilar or an Omar Brownie are, because we understand that there isn't a huge following in Liga Panameña de Fútbol, because it doesn't attract that much of attention. It barely attracts local attention. It would be hard to get the outside attention. So for them, knowing that there's an opportunity when facing a club like Toronto and playing in Champions League, it gives them the opportunity to let themselves known, and why not, dream and aspire to be part of a transfer situation in the next couple of months.
You mentioned a few names of players. Can you mention more? Who are the players to look out for if you were a TFC head coach? When you look at Independiente, who are the very high-quality players that can give trouble to Toronto? And what style does Independiente like to play?
So we're going to have to go straight and direct with Jorman Aguilar. This is a player who had been doing the rounds in European play, from some first division to some reserve level, but always, from in the European level. Anything Europe is always better than playing here in Panama. But after a couple of tournaments where he was seeing less and less minutes of play, he ended up getting this offer from Independiente last semester, when he wasn't getting much minutes, if I'm not mistaken, in Portugal League, and he made the transfer back home. Initially, it was something like it was seen as a regression in his play, and not being part of the preseason and coming in the middle of last tournament. As I said, Kai some sort of neglected, or it wasn't, the effort wasn't there when it came to the last tournament. They came off their winning or their championship tournament. You had high expectations for that team. They weren't even close to achieving. If I'm not mistaken, they failed to miss the playoff round, which is fifth and sixth team out of 10 in our league. They failed to make that into the next round. So it was a disappointing season where they had all the hopes put into this semester. And along with their hopes and their intentions for this semester, we have seen a Jorman Aguilar who has been a great player in these first four games of our tournament. Kai is currently the leader, and they came in to this week where they faced Toronto in the highest spirits ever, because they have achieved what they weren't able to last semester. Along with him, we have to count Omar Brownie, which was the second most important player from the team that made it to their first title 2 tournaments ago. Brownie is a very skillful player. He's fast, and he has been able to understand and complement his play along with Jorman. Other players, I can mention the goalkeeper Eddie Roberts, who recently had his first opportunity with the national team when they play the U.S. in the off FIFA dates friendly a couple of weeks ago. We can also mention the veteran player, ageless Cholo Torres. This guy has played. He has won over 10 tournaments here in Panama. Every time you think he's about to retire, you get to see Cholo Torres with another interesting participation. So he's going to play. Who's playing the 5 position in the field. He's playing the contention, the defensive mid, but he's regressing a little bit, obviously because of his age. He doesn't have the exit as he used to, the drive. So they're wary of where his position on the field in order to avoid any sort of mistake. So if I have to mention players, it's Jorman, it's Cito Brownie, Omar Brownie, and obviously Mr. Torres.
Obviously, Toronto is going through its own transition at a time right now. I'm just wondering what the perception down there is of the opponents in this round of TFC, and what kind of excitement there is, if any, around this game right now.
There is excitement, there is interest. The obvious, or what must be stated here, is that as a young club, Independiente, they do not have the huge following. They are not even the biggest team of their area. So you don't expect too many people. The reality is that when it comes to international play, unless it's the classic rivals from our league, there tends to be a support towards the national team participating in international play. So there should be some sort of interest in general. We saw the first images of Toronto flying in town, and knowingly that Jovinko is off the team for this tournament, which is some sort of relief, even if he would have played or not. We know that there's still important names. So the first face you see off that plane is Michael Bradley. So it's a player to be wary of. So there is interest. It might change a little bit in terms of can they make it through or can't they make it through when it comes to the Jovinko factor. So at least they don't have Jovinko this time. So let's see if we can get something out of that.
All right, let's turn our attention a little bit to the national team and the success to make that World Cup just this past summer. How has that changed the state of the game in Panama? The success of back-to-back cycles, almost making it there, then finally getting over the hump. We saw the images in Russia this past year. What has that meant for the game in Panama?
Curiously, it's a transition period as well, because making it to the World Cup meant the highest of emotions, but at the same time it meant the highest of expectations. So how was the national football scheme going to become predominant, relevant, important once the World Cup was over? So you have 4 to 5 players retiring, which were the backbone of this team. So that's the start. So you need to transition into the new generation, the players that are not going to initially make a spark, but they have to earn their spot little by little. Obviously, there are names that have been here before and that have played with the veterans who have retired. But I can say that with all respect to the players who are on the national team, we can't find yet, from the month of July on, we haven't found that quality natural leader in the squad. So I think that's one of the most interesting parts. We've been through 2 intern coaches, first Gary Stemple and now Julio Deli Valdez, who was appointed last week initially for upcoming friendlies in Europe, one of them against Brazil. So that's a marquee matchup for us. And then he's supposed to be staying for Gold Cup, but I have to stress the supposed to be staying, because there is a transition of power as well. The current direction, or the directors, from the Federación Panameña de Football are going to go through a election process in the next week. So, I mean, even though the front runner has stated that he will acknowledge the continuity for Julio Deli Valdez, at least towards the Gold Cup, I mean, we have to wait and see when he sits there and makes that decision. But for now, he's supposed to be staying there. So it's been a blurry period where national team has played with a lot of young players, a lot of young kids who have made their debut for the national team. And it's until now that there seems to be some clarity as to what is supposed to happen, at least for the short term, with Julio Deli Valdez taking the reins of the Panama national team until Gold Cup.
we don't have the chance to talk about Panamanian football that often, so I'm going to finish the interview with two questions surrounding maybe the world of football from a Panamanian perspective. One thing you mentioned is the Gold Cup this summer, and I'm wondering how the Gold Cup is perceived by Panamanian soccer fans, football fans. Is it considered, is it viewed like one of the biggest tournaments that it can win every 2 years, or is it viewed like a stepping stone or like I would say, a rite of passage for young players coming into the national team?
We've been to 2 finals, so I'll say that national teams have really taken the responsibility and the interest into Gold Cup participation. As I said, this is a transition year, but for most of our lives, or at least my professional life following the national team, every time I've heard, you know what, I'll trade you a Gold Cup for a World Cup qualification. So now that we've achieved that, now that we made it to the World Cup and we felt the highs and lows of being a part of the 32 teams, what is a new mentality? I am positive that we're now looking at teams that need to win the Gold Cup, because we've been there before in our transition to become a World Cup team. But now that we made it, that change, that mentality change is going to be interesting. We have to be honest. Julio just took the reins 1 week ago, had his first practice with local players today. By the way, no CAI player, no Independiente players there. He's respecting their international play. So he's had his first training session today, and Gold Cup is in 3 to 4 months. So what are the real expectations for this time? I don't think they're clear. Although Panamanians do understand that this is the highest level we can play, always expecting or dreaming of another invitation to participate in a Copa America, as we did in 2016 when we qualified to that, beating Cuba in a playoff round here in Panama. So yes, our highest level is always going to be the Gold Cup, and now the mentality, it has to be directed to winning this tournament once we have already been a World Cup team.
And like you probably know by now, our bread and butter for me and Duane for Duane and I, is Major League Soccer. We talk about Major League Soccer during our sleep even sometimes. And I'm wondering, how is Major League Soccer perceived now in Panama with the influx of money over the last couple of years, the new teams, big names, and big stadiums being built now in Major League Soccer? I'm wondering, how is it perceived in Panama?
I have to make some sort of disclosure here. You're probably asking the wrong person, because I'm very biased towards the MLS. I'm sorry, MLS, not the MLS. I'm going to get people on me for that. I'm very biased towards MLS. I like Major League Soccer. I'm a follower of the league, of its direction, of everything that surrounds Major League Soccer. I'm very happy every time I see a Panamanian player that gets the opportunity to showcase themselves in these teams, in the league as well. I've seen its growth. I'm very excited about Austin, Nashville, Miami. So I'm interested into its growth. Here in Panama, it's still not perceived as a high-level league. It's still not there. There is a bias. There is still a perception of a retirement league. There is the relegation situation drives people away, knowing that you're not going to be you're not going to suffer from relegation. It really changes some of the perception, because when you see players or Panamanian players in other leagues where they struggle with relegation, it actually helps them in their maturity level, in their play, in their mentality. Over here, when you're 3/4 of a season in and your possibilities of making it to the playoffs are slim, you see the change of interest, or you see the difference. In other leagues, when it comes to not getting there to a playoff or the next round, you're worried about relegation. Since that doesn't happen, the Panamanian, in general, perceives that this league is very permissive. Panamanians have a strong following for European leagues, as I'm sure happens in many places of the world. So when they try to make a comparison, everyone rather have a Panamanian player in a second division in Europe instead of MLS, regardless of structure. Although I am a firm believer that institutions like Toronto, Atlanta, and those Seattle, for instance, they seem to have an idea of where they want to go. So every time I see a player linked to any of these teams, we had Cooper in Toronto a couple of years ago when they were able to to become champions, and then Roman Torres and the Sounders and things like that. It really grabs my attention, and I try to direct the conversation in the positive light towards MLS, but it's still there. It still isn't there.
Thank you for preaching the right word. That's good, and we hope for more MLS fans from Panama. Thank you very much for your time today, David. You can follow David on Twitter at David Sakata, and you can follow his work on Cable on the Sports and on Diario Pro. David, thank you very much for your time today, and we hope you have a great game tomorrow.
Thank you. You too as well. We'll talk soon.
And we'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. At Soccer Today SPN live Monday to Friday on Twitter. We have our video show live, available everywhere you get your podcast as well. And once a week, usually on Thursdays, the Two Solitude Soccer Podcast, where Duane and I go deep into Canadian soccer topics, trivia, and of course coverage. For patrons only, $2 a month will give you access to that exclusive show. Duane, how do you feel about the CONCACAF Champions League starting tomorrow already?
Well, we had a snowstorm last night, so it's a little hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that the North American competitive season is starting tomorrow, albeit not here a week tomorrow. There's going to be a game a kilometer from where I am, and there's a foot of snow outside. Anyway, should be fun. Look, I think from a Toronto perspective, and we should focus on Toronto now, it's either going to be the best thing that happens to this team or the worst thing that possibly could happen to this team tomorrow night. Because what I mean by that is there's been so much distraction over the fact that we've lost Javinko, they've lost Vasquez. We understand this. There's been so much anger and frustration and irrationality, bluntly, in the TFC fan base about the state of this. I mean, there are people arguing that this team is, the worst team in the world again or something, which is, a little bit Javinko fanboy is what it comes down to. Like, this is my message to them, and I doubt any of them are listening to this, is like, did you support the team or the player? Like, whatever, if it was the player, fine, but realize that you're not being entirely rational when you're evaluating this right now. But they need to.
I was going to add something. Javinko wasn't Gretzky, Javinko wasn't Messi, and Javinko wasn't Ronaldo. So yeah, there's a future. There's a post Javinko era in Toronto, like there was a pre, and like there's going to be more good players, if not better than Javinko in the future, and that's almost a guarantee.
Yeah, and look, he was a brilliant player when he was here, especially the first two seasons. Absolutely. And as we've talked about many, many times before, when he lined up to those free kicks, you could feel the electricity in the air at BMO Field because there was a good chance he might score. That was his greatest skill for sure, was the ability to find the back of the goal off of a set piece from 20 yards. And missing that is going to be something that's going to take a little of the excitement out of the air. But it does not necessarily mean that, and I don't want to get into a debate about whether it was the right move at this time. We've all been over that 100 times now, but it doesn't mean
we
that
had that debate already.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you just move like that. Everything fall. The sky does not necessarily fall because one player leaves. Obviously, it would be ideal for them to have the addition in now, and we all know what that target is, and we'll update that in a minute. But in terms of this competition, with all due respect to David and to the Panamanian League and to the club that they're playing, is a massive step below Major League Soccer in terms of quality, and the head-to-head record demonstrates that.
Yeah,
Panamanian.
I was going to say, Duane, you know who they faced on February 13th? You're going to laugh. It was a 3-3 draw between Independiente on the road to Arabe Unido. Remember Arabe Unido? Yes, the Impact played them before, and TFC played them before back in the old CCL days.
Yeah, TFC's played Arab United twice.
Exactly.
So there you go. It's I actually there's for those TFC fans that have been around long enough, whether you were at the last game of the season in, I believe it was 2010, when they actually played a CCL game against the Arabe Unido after the season ended. like the MLS season ended and then they had a game 2 days later, like a complete dead runner that didn't mean anything. There was about 6,000 people in the stands, and if you were part of those 6,000, it's like the people that claim that they were at Woodstock that actually were type thing. You know what I mean? Like it's like, I was.
That's according to people, there were like 20,000 people were there, or they say they were there at that game, but there was only 6.
Yeah, funny story. A lot of our listeners will know who Sonia Mizio is. That is the day that I met Sonia. I arranged to get her tickets, and we met at Morrow before the games and became friends. So that's a historic day in my TFC Twitter notorious people sort of friendship level. So at any rate, that complete aside. Look, I mean, TFC is still the heavy favorite in this tie. This is what I will say. You know, as he said, Michael Bradley was the first player off that plane. And regardless of whether you're one of those people that think Michael Bradley is the worst soccer player on earth, if you are one of those people, you're wrong. You know, you just are. There's no one in the Panamanian League right now that is at his quality, because it is not a league that Panamanians will primarily stay at if they don't have to. It is a decent league. It is a league that the Canadian Premier League should aspire to get to that level, and I think the Canadian Premier League can realistically aspire to get to that level. But if the TFC was playing a Canadian Premier League team right now, there would be no one in this market that would be going, "Oh, the sky is falling, they're going to lose." Now, that's not to say that things can't happen. Things could, of course, happen. You know, the good old Arab United or Toro, which are the two teams that we've seen in this competition more, San Francisco as well. They have the 3 teams that we typically see in here. They do occasionally step up and get a win, typically at home, and typically against the teams that are at a similar level than them. I didn't check their record against Major League Soccer teams and Liga MX teams, but I suspect it's not very good. I did mention the overall record of Panamanian teams in the Champions League era, which started in it's when they went to group stages after the old tournament style that they did. I believe it was 2008. They did that?
2008 and 9, because that's when the Impact played Santos Laguna, so 2008-9 season.
Yeah, that was the first season when the first time the Impact went deep was the first year of the Champions League era. So since then, the Panamanian teams have won 20 games, drawn 9, lost 42. So, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. TFC has played them in the past and has beaten them past, even when they were bad TFC. So there you go. This is still...
Oh, go ahead. I was going to move
It's still theirs to lose, is what I'm saying. I mean, look, I think we all, and what I meant from my conversation at the start is I think most TFC fans, I live in TFC Twitter, so I'm getting this negativity constantly, and that's sort of where my reaction comes from. It is I sort of, you get contrarian after a while when you're like trying to be, and I'm not saying I'm the only person capable of being logical here, close folks, but when you're trying to be logical and you're trying to critically evaluate and sort of take a step back and take the fan hat off and look at things objectively, you get frustrated when all you're getting is a constant same, sky is falling messaging. And that's sort of where my reactions on Twitter, to come off as an apologist to some people, I'm sure, are coming from. Is you got to look at things balanced. And if people were talking like, oh, everything's is perfect and they're going to be, go 34-0 and win MLS Cup, I'd be equally going, come on, people, right? Like, Let's find the happy medium here. And I think that we need to see this team play without Buzello, hopefully, coming in to supplement that. And maybe we'll segue into this after this so that we can understand exactly what the strengths of it are, because I don't think we know. I don't think we know yet.
Well, yes. I was asked by the management of Pozuelo to make an intervention with you. It seems you have a problem, Duane. You've been harassing Pozuelo. No, I'm just kidding. But you've been watching Pozuelo literally every second of the day you can, and your family called and they want you back. They want you to go for dinner, and this is an intervention, Duane. You have to lay off Pozuelo.
I have watched 2 Genk games in the last week. That is true. I watched one on my phone. The stream was brilliant. And you know what? The Belgian League's entertaining. I highly recommend it to anyone that wants to find if you really want to be a football hipster out there, I highly recommend finding Belgian football streams. It was a really entertaining league. Very similar to Major League Soccer in terms of the speed and the tactics. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why we've seen some success to make this serious for a second, why we've seen players that have transitioned from there fairly easily. And that's another reason why I think this is a good target for them. But yeah, no, I've been following it pretty closely, and I tend to look for, well, that's what my followers follow me for, TFC and MLS News. So I've got to serve them for this. They pay me nothing. So really, I should probably go for a walk or something. You're right.
You got a contract with them, like a social contract of like, okay, we follow you, so now you have to do exactly what we want all the time. Otherwise, I'm going to unfollow you. Well, be my guest. Anyways,
yes.
We'll focus more on the other Champions League game in CONCACAF tomorrow on the show. We have a special guest, one of our favorites, and you can listen to it tomorrow on Soccer Today. You can follow Duane at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramee, and the show at Soccer Today SPN. We hope you like the new design of the video show. Let us know if you like. Make sure you drop a subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you like our Facebook page, and make sure you follow us on Twitter, so that way you always know when we have a new podcast, which is Monday to Friday at 11 a.m. And as always, until next time, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. Have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.